welcome back to the channel. We are continuing with our personal track vehicle build. In the previous videos, we prepared some parts. We also got our tracks ready. We got our pump and motor or engine combination ready. So at this point, we are ready to move on to building the chassis. As I have explained previously, I'm trying to do this entire build using leftover parts from around the house and around the shop. In this case here, I have pulled out all of the leftover materials that I've had from previous projects. In fact, everything that we see here on the floor, these sections of pipe, the square tube, this is all from our solar panel project that we did 2 years ago. So this is all leftover offcuts, remnants, etc. The idea is to take these bare materials and turn them into the chassis for our personal tracked vehicle. We're going to lay out the tracks, get those set up, come up with a little bit of a concept on how we are going to lay out some frame rails, a little bit of a hoop behind the driver's seat. We have a new driver's seat, that's exciting. So lay out a little hoop behind the driver's seat that will act as a roll bar, and then add a little bit of bracing in between. Find a way to incorporate a mount for our engine and pump configuration, and I think we should be pretty close to getting that machine ready to go. This is what I kind of come up with. It is not super elegant right now, but I think this will help begin to put the whole picture together as to how this is going to look. So I've got these pieces of 2x2 square tubing there, and what I'm going to do is basically that's going to be the foundation for the entire machine. Those are going to run from front to back, just as you see them here. And what we're going to do is cut these off to make an extension of this tube to come up at a 45, maybe about 8 to 10 inches. And we're going to use some of these pieces of Sked 40 pipe. We're going to do one down in the front there, then we're going to do one at the end of where those square tubes actually extend up. We're going to do something fairly similar at the back end. We're going to cut these square tubes off somewhere just after the motor, maybe right around the motor plate, and we're going to extend them up on a 45 as well, right to a point where it's going to basically create a little bit of a bumper back behind the filter there. So we'll have another piece of the round tube running across at the bottom frame rail. We'll have another piece of tube up top running across to create a little bit of a bumper. Once we get that done, I'd like to incorporate a little bit of a roll bar or a hoop, something that comes from right behind the seat here. Follow the same angle of the seat, come up, not super high, just enough so that if the machine were to roll over, it could land on the roll bar and not the engine and the seat. It's really not going to be for the rider in that case. And once we've got that hoop done, from where that crossbar is, I'd like to route with a bend in the tube. So we're going to use that long piece of tube there, make a bend that comes out, extends alongside the driver, and then ties into the back roll bar hoop. And then that'll kind of create a little bit of a operator area, if you will. So that's kind of the general plan. What I'm going to start doing now is getting the bandsaw set up so that we can cut some 22.5 degree angles on the square tubes. The 222.5 will give us a nice 45. So we'll start basically at the front here, get everything worked out in this region. From that, work our way back to where the end of the chassis needs to be, and then do our little 45 degree kick. Ideally, we can get the 4 tubes that go across in place, and then also come up with a motor mount and a seat mount. Once we've got that done, I'd say that would be a pretty good milestone for progress, and at that point we can move on to the other bars that go around the rider. Something I forgot to mention is how we're going to tie the tracks into the chassis, and how I would also like to incorporate a little bit of suspension into this unit. Won't be full suspension. We're going to basically have the tracks pivot on the chassis at the front. So we have inside of the tracks these tubes here that extend from one side through to the other side. And what I'd like to do is just extend a piece of round tubing that fits into those tubes, basically from one extreme of the track all the way under the chassis right to the other, so that in that case the tracks are going to pivot on that axis there. And we'll be able to add a little bit of suspension to the rear end of the unit to try and soak up some of those bumps. So we're going to use some of these old shock absorbers from the suspension that used to be in these tracks. I have these lighter springs. I also have another set of adjustable springs, and basically after lifting that whole monster right there, considering how much I'm going to weigh on this machine, I don't think those shocks are going to be suitable. So we're probably going to get the bigger adjustable ones out, because last thing we need is to get this all set up and then start bottoming these out with no load on it. So the design that I explained in the garage there a moment ago is really not much different from what I have here. And so that idea where the frame rails run from front to back, we have a hoop that goes around just above the engine and the seat behind the driver, and then some tubes that will also extend around the driver to create a little bit of a cockpit area, and then we can connect the controls to those tubes for the left and right steering. So this design is kind of what I already have in mind for the PTV in the garage. We have welded up both of these main frame rails with that 45 in them now. And what I'm going to do next is use a hole saw in the milling drill. We're going to drill partway through just so that we could get to the back side there. And that'll allow us to slide that piece of pipe that's going to become our lower cross member in place. And then once we've drilled that out, we're going to come to the end here and then just drill a semicircle all the way through, so that that top bumper that's going to run along the front there will actually be open on each end for us to use for future parts of the build. We have got our ends coped out here, and we also have our inner front cross member cut out. The next step here is to decide on how wide we want these frame rails to be apart. That's always a challenge. Sometimes you get things right, sometimes you get it wrong. On the Snowcat, I was a little bit too narrow, and I wish I had made it wider. I'm tempted to go as narrow as possible again here, but I'll probably land on a number and then add 2 inches just to be safe. And what we'll do is get a pipe cut for this top front bumper section here, and then for that cross member, we can get that mocked up, and then we're gonna start to work our way back. What I wanna do is have it so that this front angled section here is where you can actually rest your feet and kind of brace yourself as you're riding in the machine. And I'm a 6-foot guy, so I want to basically tailor it for myself so that it's the most comfortable for me. Anybody else in the family is shorter than me, so I'm the tallest one that I have to worry about with this setup. So like I said, I'd like to have it so you can brace your feet against the front there and sit at a comfortable distance back from that so that you're not kind of too far back or not too far forward. So we'll figure that out next after we get these front pipes cut. So I've got the seat, the engine in place again. I've come up with a dimension, a width here that I like. So it works out to being 22 inches wide, and that gives you enough room on either side of the seat so that you're not getting too far into the tracks. It also gives you enough room, leg room up front here, so there's nothing to worry about. And then the distance from the front of the seat to the inside of this angle here is 20 inches. I just chose that as a random measure, and it keeps your legs somewhat bent when you're sitting in the machine. You can brace them up against the front here, and then it's not too compact. Your knees aren't at your chest, but they're not also too far extended. And the reason for that, I wanted to make sure that I could try and keep the whole power plant at least as far forward as possible, not having it hang out way behind the machine. So I haven't moved it forward yet. There's still a couple inches of space there. Basically, I can get that recoil starter within a quarter an inch of the seat. That would be great. So try and move that weight as forward as possible so that the machine is fairly well balanced. There's a lot of weight actually up in the front of these tracks here. It's hard to believe. So I would say the weight in the track from this point forward is going to be fairly equal to the weight of just the engine and the pumps itself. Probably more actually. I'm going to say the engine and the pumps are right around 100 pounds. It's a little bit of a struggle for me to lift it off of the dolly onto there. So if it's around 100 pounds, I'm going to say each of these track assemblies is a good 80 pounds each. So yeah, a lot of the weight is going to be balanced, and the advantage of this weight here is it's the lower weight, whereas that's the higher weight. You want to have as little high weight as possible, try and lower that center of gravity. So this is how things are looking. At first I had thought about cutting this pipe off just so that it was flush kind of at the end of the frame rails. The more I look at it, I'm kind of wondering, well, should I extend the front out a little bit, maybe put a bend in this tube so it kind of deflects that way? I don't know. I'm going to think about that a little bit more. But what I am going to do right now is get that lower cross member cut, because that can go into place and start to anchor everything together. While I think about that front bumper, I'm going to come up with a distance where I'm going to cut the back of these tubes here and then start to fabricate basically the same thing that we have up front there, just in the back. Okay, we've got the front section done. Those are coped, those are drilled. We got the back section done. I was smart. I drilled these before welding them on. Way easier than trying to hang this whole thing out of the mill. So now we've just got to, on the inside here, drill out those two sections, and we'll be ready to start putting the cross members in. Alrighty, we have accomplished a lot in only 3 hours. You will have seen me cut the pipes, the bumper pieces for the front and back. Those are done. I was mentioning earlier about possibly finding a way or coming up with an idea to bring these in. I could still do that, just have to cut a couple tack welds and take that out. I'm still kind of thinking about that a little more, but for now that'll just kind of hold everything in place. I got the seat mounted, and funny thing with that, it came with a template on the box, and you would look at that and think, well, that's got to be a 2-scale template. That'd be great. You could just lay it down, use a center punch where they've indicated the centers of the holes, and drill them out. Well, not the case. This stupid drawing is just a freaking drawing. It is not to scale. All the numbers here, 152, 172, those are not real measurements on this drawing. They are just what the hole spacing is on the seat. So this was completely useless. I used it as a template, nothing lined up. I had to just go and measure out the holes, drill them, and that worked out fine. So we've gotten past that. We've made a lot of progress. I'm really happy where everything is right now. In the next part, we're going to come up with an engine mount, some brackets or some angle that's going to go across the back there. Get the engine in place. Once we're done with that, we're going to work on that little roll bar hoop and then bring a couple pipes around the operator up to the front there. So overall, like I said, I'm very happy with how this is all coming together. It's really exciting to get to this part of the build because it suddenly begins to take its final form and you get to see what this thing is really going to look like. And it looks like a lot of fun, actually. I have to admit, I love this type of fabrication when you're, cutting up pieces of tubing and steel and making a frame or making a chassis. Making something is always the best part. Working on the engine, that's okay. That's a lot of fine work. But when you get into something big like this, this is what I really enjoy doing. We're back in the garage for another night of fabrication on the personal tracked vehicle. We're going to continue to build the chassis. We started yesterday and we made quite a bit of progress. Tonight we are going to continue from where we left off. We're going to get the motor mounts installed, continue on to the roll bar, the bars going around the operator, and potentially get our track mounting bar set into place. That bar, that's an 1.125" cold rolled bar. It's going to fit into those tubes on the tracks. It's going to run continuous from one side to the other, so the tracks are going to basically slide on each side and then they're going to pivot on that front and back. So we got a bunch of work to do. Let's get going. There we go. The engine is mounted on the chassis. We've got just enough clearance between the recoil and the seat. I've only got one bolt holding it in right now. There's no point in putting more than that, but the other holes are drilled. They're ready to go. And overall, this turned out really nicely. I was a little concerned about when I had cut this angle here and where I'd placed this tube. My luck, this tube would have probably ended up somewhere in the middle of the filter, but it didn't. It actually landed in a perfect spot. You can see that the back of the pumps is nicely in line with that. That's going to turn out really nice. This bumper is actually going to protect the hoses as they come out of the pumps here. They're going to be pointing downward. We'll probably use a 45-degree adapter on that. But overall, this is looking really good. So the next step, what we're going to do is start working on that hoop. We're going to get the hydraulic pipe bender out. We're going to use this piece of 1-inch Sked 40 pipe and build a little bit of a hoop that's going to come around and act as our roll bar, and go from there. Things are moving along nicely. I managed to get the hoop for the roll bar bent. That turned out pretty good. I couldn't do that whole bend in one go. I had to do it in 2 pieces and then weld it together at the top. The way the pipe bender works, if you try and go for a really big bend all at once, it will actually kink the pipe. And so I ended up doing that a little bit over here, a little bit there. And then the next time around, if you break up that bend into, like, let's say 1, 2, and then 3, you can kind of massage the pipe into the shape that you want without putting as much kink in it. There's still a little bit of it, but it's a little more subtle. It looks not too bad. Something that I did realize is the cover for the air filter isn't going to necessarily fit, but that's fine. If I run the air filter, I can make a little canister that just fits over top of that. That's no big deal. The whole cover is actually kind of bulky, and so I'm not too particularly concerned about it not fitting on there. So we'll deal with that after, but at least we can get an air filter on there. That won't be a big deal. So the next step now is to come up with a little bit of a pipe that comes out on a slight angle, comes around, and I'm thinking of just having it meet up maybe either here or straight on with the pipe, with the frame rail. If I come here, it's going to be one bend to take it from there and then kick it in behind the driver. That might be a little bit easier for fabrication purposes. It is coming along quite nicely. I managed to get these tubes bent. They are coped at each end, there and there. And the way I did it, I cut just a 5-foot piece of pipe. It's easier to bend a shorter piece rather than trying to swing around a 20-footer in the garage here. And when I did that, I knew that I would have extra. So when I coped that in first, and well, I bent, coped that end, and once that was all fitted, I came and I just marked it here, and then I cut it with the hole saw to cope it there. And then the little piece that was left over from that actually fits in there just perfectly. It doesn't get in the way. It will help support this roll bar a little bit, and it uses up that extra piece of steel that otherwise would have gotten tossed into the recycling bin or the scraps bin. So overall, that turned out good. I am still considering extending this bumper out. That's why I haven't done anything further with it yet. I think if I were to do that, it would actually look a little bit better, considering that these upper tubes here don't intersect with the frame rails. It would just tie it in a little better. It would look a little bit better overall. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I have a piece of that tube out by the shed to be able to grab that, bend it up, get it ready. That'll be no big deal. So anyway, that is where we have this. I am going to do a little bit of cleanup around these welds here, get them just tacked into place so that basically what you see here is locked in, and we'll go from there. Well, I've said it before, and I will say it again. This is really coming along nicely. I am very excited with how a lot of these tubes have come together. It really just feels like a beefier version of that go-kart that I had shown you earlier. So overall, yeah, I'm really happy with it. Everything is fitting together nicely. An idea that I had while I was putting this together, I had to take the seat out. I'm thinking what I might do is use a couple more pieces of the channel, the 1x2 channel, and just make it so that the bolts where the holes where the seat bolts in, I'll slot those so that the seat can actually slide forward and back a little bit, give you a little bit of adjustability. Might not be the easiest to do, like from an adjustment standpoint. You'll have to get a wrench out or a socket wrench and actually go in there and adjust it, but it might make it a little bit better. So that's something to think about. Aside from that, I am pretty much finished with the little roll bar and these tubes that go around the operator's area. In the next video, what we're going to do is start to come up with a plan on how to attach these tracks together. So I'd mentioned earlier, I have that piece of 1 1/8" cold rolled steel bar, and it just barely fits into these tubes here. We're going to have to find a way either just to machine these tubes out, find a bit or something that's going to just clean those out enough so that that tube can slide, or these can slide onto that rod. And then the other thing that we're going to do is work on getting some shock absorbers set up for the back end of this here. These are the old track attachments from the Mini Snowcat. They sat somewhere in there like that. What I'll end up doing is I'm going to end up extending those out just enough so that I can get a shock to actually land, attach it up here somewhere and land right down on top of it, and that'll give us some suspension for the PTV overall, make the ride a little bit nicer. So having said that, I am going to end this video here. There's still a lot to cover, and we will be going over everything throughout the series. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on anything. Otherwise,